Okay, so I'm trying out something a little bit unconventional with this, and I decided to go the route of building an application with, so that will be my presentation, is the application itself. So as you can see, there's going to be an introduction. I'm going to do AngularJS versus Angular, because there's been a lot of talks on that recently and what the difference is, right? And then the beginning, the middle, the future, and then the Prizotron will be like a live code demo type thing. That might be something the most interesting to everyone, I'm not sure. But so pretty much this application was the starter kit, which is what we built at Veritas as well, to help products and consumers to get something up and going quickly and PO things out. So you can see I started this just a couple days ago, and it took me a few hours just to get this up and running, and it looks like our Veritas is wanting to look like, essentially, by our designers and things like that. So my name is Alex Winter. My mom gave me a great introduction there. So for the past 6 months or so, we've been focusing on this component library that we have, and I'm going to be going through the start of it and what went so well and what didn't go so well. And so the main goal of this all is just across the company to have a consistent UI and UX experience for everyone. So this kind of requires for having reusable components that we can have, and just so everyone doesn't have to keep recreating the wheel for the same thing over and over. And during this, feel free to stop me at any time for questions. I don't mind stopping what I'm doing or whatever to talk about that. So let's move on to Angular. So I guess another note on this is this isn't very elaborate. As you can see, there's not much to these at all. So they're kind of just check boxes with things, the topic points, and then the Prizotron is going to be something I build out at the end here. So let's zoom in on this a little here. So the first thing is Angular versus AngularJS. So recently Google announced their whole branding guidelines for Angular versus AngularJS, and what this refers to is pretty much they're calling what was, so everyone used to refer to it as Angular 2. So I just wanted to go over this because I know there's still a lot of confusion around this. So I wanted to try to get the word out to make it more clear, you know. So the Angular 2, and now it's actually Angular 4, so this is the reason they're doing this, right, is because they want it to be semantic versioning, where any breaking changes are going to increase that version, things like that. So they're currently on Angular 4, which was released a few weeks ago, and our component library is on that new version as well, because we are following Material 2, which is the component library that Google has, and that's following the material design specs. So the big point of this is, like searching in Google and stuff, you still probably want to put the 2 there, because if you just put Angular, you're just going to find AngularJS. So right, it's all a mess. Like I wish they would have called it circular or something. I know we've all had this before, but so I guess that's just the big thing to call out here is like they're going with just Angular now, and that's going to be the future. Like it's not going to be about versions anymore. Let's go on to, let's go back here. I lost it. Open a new tab. Yeah. Problem of not using PowerPoint. So yeah, and then just to go on to what's up now. So Angular 4 just became available. You'll see this was as of March 23rd, 2017. So this is kind of, they say it's an invincible makeover. So Angular 2, and for the most part, there really isn't many changes to make this upgrade. I think one of the big ones is they're deprecating ng template. Maybe that's what they changed it to. Or they're deprecating template and they're switching it to ng template. Things I think we had to do. But for the most part, it all just works on this newer version. And you can see it's smaller, faster. There's a new animation package they're adding in. They improved ngIf, ng4. So a lot of improvements came from this Angular 4. So I definitely think it's worth the effort upgrading to that. I mean, I notice when we did it, our applications became faster. Like I could just tell when we did it that this happened. So, and like I said, it's not a big deal at all to go from 2 to 4, for example. If you go to 1 to 2, that's a different discussion. But so let's go back here. I did have these opening in a new tab. I thought. So, and then just to give some context on the Angular update guide they have out here. So this is an application that but Google has out there that gives you the option to choose what version of Angular you're currently on. So you know, let's say, oh, all the way up to 6 here, so they're already working on that somehow. I don't know. But so 2.0 is like the lowest version you can select in this list, all the way up to things. So they don't have 1 here because it's probably a way bigger conversation doing that. They have complete guides out there to do that. But like you can choose 2.1, and if you want to go to 4.0, for example, and then you can just specify how complex your app is. We'll just say, in this example, we have an advanced application, and then you can do the show me how to update. And then they just give you information on what you would need to do to go from 2 to 4. So like just some examples on that. So we have the renderer.invoke element method is changing or being removed. So you need to figure out a replacement for that. And then the one I talked about earlier was renaming your template tags to ng template. So that's something that's being deprecated in these upcoming releases here. So this is just a nice little app that they have out there that shows you quickly on what you need to do to go from a version to another version, right? I did it again. Okay, so let's go back here. So let's start at the beginning now. So how many of you have worked with a component library like Bootstrap or Material? Or so I'm assuming most of you are going to raise your hands. Like that's pretty popular comment. So what the VDL vision here is that we do this image in a second here, but pretty much the vision is making a company-wide Bootstrap in theory. So it's just making, and what we did was kind of go around to the product groups that we have at Veritas, and we interviewed them each to see what technologies they were using, what we could use to possibly build out something company-wide, right? So the big thing we found people were using was Angular 1. And we talked with them and we did some research on what the future of Angular was and all that stuff. So this was 6 months back or so. So I'm trying to recall all that we did for that. But so the big thing we found is a lot of people were wanting to go to Angular 2 and beyond, right? But that's a big overhaul and a big rewrite for a lot of applications. There is ways to do it piece by piece and things like that, but it just takes time. So, but that's probably the future that we're going to go towards, is the whole Angular 2 infrastructure and things like that. So that's the reason we went with that. That decision there is going with Angular. And so there was a few teams that were on these one-off technologies and things like that throughout the company, but this is all about like converging, so we're all on the same consistent experience, right? So this way, people that use these base components like buttons, create all those simple like list items, things like that. So you notice these lists are Veritas's list items, right? So it's all about just making it look and feel across all our products to be a similar thing. So that's kind of the whole vision thing here. And if we go down to this image I put in this application here, so you notice we have the whole UI engineer front end and the front end devs and UX community here. So this is kind of the UX community where the developers will talk to the UX community, which is made. So the UX community designers are made up of designers from each product group. So each one of them we kind of talked with, or there's kind of a loop that goes on, and we talk with each engineer and community members in that, and we figure out what is it that the design should look like, and they give us specs back to the main team that is building up these general components. So then we also have this idea of a web asset, which is a lot like if you go, I'll just go to it right now. So if we go to ux.veritas.com here, and I'm not VPN again, so that's a problem. Give me 1 sec. Keep that there. It's fine. Yeah. Just kidding, it's not. I hate it. But, so now this application should load. So this is what, so if you go to the Bootstrap site, like you'll see a pretty similar thing to this. You'll see, so that we have topography on forms input. So these are our Angular components on the side here that we have for people to consume. So this is the application that users will go. I'll go into this in more detail a little later, but that's what this web asset. So this is kind of the first product we had of utilizing the components we were building. So we're kind of eating our own dog food, right? We're using those components to build out that web asset application, which in turn developers will go to use our components. Kind of confusing a little bit, but and then the main team which I'm on is the VDL delivery engine team. You'll see here. So that's who's actually making the components and things like that, and maintaining that web asset application. And then we have the UI framework. So we ended up going with Angular. 2 is wrong there. It should be Angular. But that's beside the point. So basically, our first attempt at all this is we have this repo. So it's called Angular 2 old now. But the first attempt at this was pretty much just starting from scratch. As we were doing this, we found, so these are the initial components we built out. So we have buttons, some input text, and popovers. So as we were doing this, we had some demos that we would give out to the people that would eventually consume this. And what it ended up occurring to us is that people needed things right away, right? So just doing these components one at a time and not starting from something that already existed made this a real challenge. And that made it hard to get feedback too, because we couldn't even get, we had to have something already completed from our side to even get feedback on a component. So the big, let's go back here quick here. So that was our first attempt at going at everything with the feedback from demos. So then, yeah, so what are the whole benefits of Veritas Design Language? It's seamless platform experience across products, improving our customer user experience, improving and transforming UX culture to a happier and more collaborative environment, reducing time to customers on new features and updates, and overall, like, reduce design development time from idea to implementation, right? So hopefully speeding up the process it takes to build out a site. So let's move on to, I want to try to spend 20, 30 minutes on these sections and save most of it for the PySocion part. I'll actually show some coding. So basically the middle is where this is where we decided to go to like something that already existed. So we looked at a few component libraries out there that were existing. And we figured Material 2 would be a good choice because our designers were doing a lot of their stuff based off of Material. So that was one factor that played in. And then another thing that played into that was that it's just done by Google, right? So we, for the most part, thought they knew what they were doing and things like that. So we've learned now that maybe things could be better, but so this is Angular, so you can just Google Material 2 and this will pop up right for you. So this is Material 2's component library. You'll notice when I show our structure of our code, it looks very, very similar to this. And so that's because this is what we started from. We were originally intending to extend on top of the components, so not really just like fork the repository and just take the source code from scratch, but really just extend on top of the components by using extends. In TypeScript, you can do that and things like that. But we found problems with that because of how Material 2 was doing. They would use private variables in certain cases where we would be able to access those variables that we needed to change and do different functionality for the stuff we wanted to do in the Veritas version, right? So, I mean, that's one recommendation I would say. something like this is to make sure you're able to do the functionality you want to do if you started with something. So that was a big factor in that. So eventually we ended up just deciding to pretty much just fork the repository. So we pretty much just have a clone of this repository. And what we're doing now is, so what we do is we just kind of just take cherry pick material to commits as they do stuff. So if they have a bug fix, we can just go in and cherry pick that commit ID, for example. We were doing full-on just at the very beginning of this. We were doing full-on merges, so we would just merge everything they have on top of what we were doing. As we've gone more and more into this, we've changed more and more stuff. That becomes increasingly difficult to just merge whatever they have in. So we're kind of at the point where we're kind of diverging from them a little bit. It's kind of become our own open source thing within Veritas, which is ultimately the goal of this, to not just only have one team work on it, but have everyone contributing. So that is material 2. So now I'm going to go into what it takes to kind of take a material 2 component and turn it into a Veritas component. So for this example, I'm going to be opening up WebStorm here. If it's not open, okay. Computer's working too hard, I think. So yeah, you'll notice the structure on the left-hand side here is pretty similar to what Material 2 had in that GitHub repo.
Alex has this habit of being able to outwork his machine. His fan's always running, he's always ready to go, he's super fast.
And tell me to slow down if I'm going too fast on something. I tend to speak fast sometimes. So, let's see those. So I guess I'm just going to go up here for now. Or not, that won't load either. Okay, so this is the repository we have for our VDL-ized components in our VDL Angular repository. So in the source lib here is where we have the components that live for our project. So you notice there are a lot of general things like accordions, having autocomplete buttons, cards, chips, things like that. The one I want to talk about right now is just the buttons. So in Material 2, I'm going to go here for that. So you notice they have the same component structure. They have a little CDK thing they've recently added that we haven't taken in, and I don't know if we will, but so if we go to lib here, go to buttons. So this is the structure they have. So Material 2 also has a theming concept, which we decided to rip out, essentially. Instead of doing themes, we kind of just have one Veritas brand we're going for, right? So it didn't really make sense in our case to use this theming thing that they have. Maybe there will be in the future. We can always come back here and re-add these things, right? That's what's nice about this is anything we remove, it's kind of living with Material 2, and we don't have to keep it around if we don't want. So if we look at, I'm going to go to material. So material.angular.io, this is where all their, so this is that components I just showed you guys. So they have this, so you notice this application is pretty similar to our web asset that I showed you. We've kind of changed the look around a little bit to be more Veritas-y. It's another term I just put up for that. So you notice there, so this is, they have a button here, so they have a click me button, and then they have API references and examples. So here's some more examples of their buttons that they have. So when it comes to our application, so what we did, instead of doing the theming, so you'll notice we have no theming file in here. We just have a base buttons SCSS, and we have the concept of, so we have a large button, a mini button, and a small button. Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah.
So we have the concept of smaller button sizes, and so we have a lot more bootstrap-like buttons than materials. We went with so we have a primary button, we have a secondary and tertiary. So you notice that is in the let me find it here. So buttons are mostly SCSS, for example, but so we have the button, primary button as a selector, secondary button, tertiary button. You have to keep reminding me of that one. So we have the button. So these are the selectors that goes into the button.ts file. So this all gets eventually outputted to the consumers that are consuming the component library itself. So for example, you would be able to do button space ADL-primary-button to get a button that is Veritas. So that's just how you would do that, is primary button, secondary button, tertiary button, icon button. Whereas if you look at material 2s in their button TS, so they don't really have the concept of the primary tertiary button. They more so went the route of just having a regular button, and they have some raised buttons in there. So our designers went a little different on that route, so we just could switch things up. And because we were able to fork the repository, this is a lot easier to change things. So pretty much it's just going, so what VDLizing the components in the grand scheme of things means is just taking the design that exists for material or what our designers come up with and creating a component for it that'll work for everyone in our company, right? So when we talk about the material one, so we've gone through, and you'll notice, let me go to the here. So these are the ones that the material 2 README is very similar to ours as well. We have a lot of the same stuff, but we actually have more components now than they do, I think. So we've been kind of building out our own components, as well as taking, if they have something that works for us, we'll take that, of course, reuse what we can and utilize it that way, right? So a lot of it's like popovers, for example, does not exist in material 2 yet. I don't know if it ever will. So that was something we needed as Veritas and products wanted. So we went ahead and just created that component instead of using something that they had because it didn't exist. Let's talk about the starter kit here. So the starter kit is just an application. So this is what I kind of touched on at the beginning. You have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You have to put the scheme back to the button. Did you take the top over that?
So we didn't port anything in from Bootstrap at all. So we took the concept of what Bootstrap had and just made the colors and stuff. And made the directives that allowed for us to do a primary button, secondary button, and tertiary button. So since material 2 didn't have the concept of those things, we just created them ourselves, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So starter kit here. So this starter kit is just something that products can get. So they just clone this repository that we have in our Bitbucket. And they just clone this repository and easily can get an Angular application up and running. So this has the component library we have, it has it all tied into. So you'll notice we have our check. So these checkboxes are Veritas checkboxes, and this input text box as well. We have layouts here. So we're using Flexbox Grid. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's kind of it's a CSS3 Flexbox grid system that exists out there. So we decided to use that because it was a very lightweight solution, and a lot of our developers were used to Bootstrap's grid system, and what this gives you is something very similar. So you notice the class equals row, and then you do the class equals XS12 to give you a full length line, right? So that's the whole point of kind of having this tied into all this as well, just because it gives our consumers something a little easier to work with. And Material 2 does have a grid system kind of built in for this type of thing too, but what we found is that our consumers didn't really like how complicated that was and things like that. Whereas the solution we have with Flexbox Grid is all SCSS instead of using components or directives for that type of stuff.
Have you dabbled with Bootstrap Oil?
Bootstrap for this project?
Yeah.
Or just in general? No, not really. So we did look at Bootstrap like component libraries in tandem with this as well, but because our designers went mainly off of Google's material design, is the reason we kind of shifted everything to not Bootstrap.
Well, Bootstrap 3 uses
Sure. Yeah, and we don't have any jQuery in our project at all, so that's another good point going on Bootstrap. But there are Bootstrap equivalents, equivalent component libraries in Angular 2, which is why I mentioned that. Let's see here. So that's a starter kit. It's just a simple application to get someone up running quickly and running components for their application if they want to test things out and things like that. And what that's based off of, just so I make that. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, so it's Angular 2 Webpack starter kit. So you notice I named it to Angular starter now, so there aren't the 2 on there anymore. But this is what the project, we started that starter kit out of, so we reuse code here as well. So this is what that starter kit. Pretty sure we're fairly out of date with what they've been doing here now with this. We kind of left ours alone. We haven't had a need to really update anything on that one yet, for the most part. And then regarding the VDL web asset here, I'm going to try to quickly go over this because I want to get to the coding stuff. So this is what I showed you guys earlier. So this is just where developers can go. So developers are our main consumers of the component library we have. So this kind of is the initial starting point that we point people at. So this is like, we have overview, examples, API reference. So you notice that's very similar to what Material 2 has for theirs. We kind of switched the format around a little bit for that. So you can click examples, and it'll bring you down to specific examples that people can see for these things. And then we also have a more information section giving more information on that particular example. We also have display code. So this is where someone can just come in here and copy paste this stuff into the starter kit, for example, and see it running in their own application. So it's a way for people to easily go in and get something up and running. So yeah, these are just all and then we have them labeled as navigation. So whatever component you want to utilize for those things. So pretty much the future is where I'm going to go to now. So there's a few things with Material 2 that we found that they're doing that maybe could be better. So one thing is they're not using Webpack at all in their stuff. So they're using Gulp, and that is just, it's slow. Just to be blunt about it, like Gulp is really slow at processing a lot of stuff, but Webpack and their Webpack loaders and things spin these things up really fast, and it makes the cycle time go a lot smoother from saving something and having a test run it and things like that. So definitely if you haven't heard of Webpack or done anything like that, I would highly recommend taking a look at that for Angular applications. So I'll just do a quick demonstration on that kit as well. So
you guys use Angular CLI?
We are currently not using CLI. So
the support from Material 2, they were building it all Gulp and things like that beforehand. So
yeah.
the CLI is really about, I guess it works either way. We haven't really explored either way. Porting this over as well.
Yeah, in theory, this should work with the CLI, but it wasn't in the beginning. So Material 2 kind of wasn't using their own thing for all this. And I read something about that a while back. And the reason they weren't using Webpack and things like that is because it wasn't ready at the time for a component library. I think that recently has changed. It seems to have the things required, and we've been exploring switching all of our stuff into Webpack. So that's something we've really diverged, that we're going to be diverging a lot from Material 2 is switching to Webpack, for example. So let's do this quick here. So just to show you guys that web asset application that runs. So if I run npm so it does still do some Gulp things to build the component library because we still have all that using Gulp, but this web asset application, so you notice the first part of this is the slow part, which is using Gulp, and then the second part you'll notice it loading the application will be the fast part. I think I can on this, maybe I can't. Anybody know how to do that on this? I tried that. This is for another terminal. Yeah. Not sure. Okay. Oh, just have to live with that for now. So you'll notice how long this is taking right now. So this is doing all of our component building and all of that stuff to put the components in a package where people can consume those things. So now it's in Gulp Docs, which creates the API references and the documentation for those things. So a big thing with this as well is a lot of this stuff, when we did that first project I was speaking about earlier, is a lot of this stuff we didn't have, right? Because we weren't starting with something, so we would have had to build all of this ourselves at some point. But since we switched to this Material 2 library and utilizing this, we got a lot of this stuff for free, so a lot of this infrastructure stuff came with it. So I mean, that first project we use, a big lesson we learned with that, I think, is that just all of the reuse, even if some things aren't the greatest, but we got a lot of stuff which allowed us to confirm what we were building was right and the consumers that we were trying to get it to. So that was what that done. So you'll notice that it's quite a bit quicker in spinning up that application there. I'm just going to get out of that for a second here. So another thing we were working on is improving our CI/CD pipeline. So I'm just going to skim over this. It's not that important, but so a lot of the infrastructure we're working on now is getting what we want to get to is having every commit into that component library be a release. So that's kind of our end goal. Right now we're doing it in like 2-week iterations, things like that. So it takes a while for someone to get something they need, for example. So that's just something on that quick, and then also VDLizing and creating more components. So the big thing we're going to be working on next is data tables. That's a lot of things our products are going to need, and that's one thing we're going to be looking towards. I think if anyone doesn't have any questions on that first few set of things, I'm going to go into the component library to build out the Python job. So that should be maybe a little more fun. Sorry if that first part was boring, but so you have to look at Material 2. Yeah, we can't show what we've done, I don't think. We might get in trouble for that. I would love to make it open source, but people at Veritas don't like that.
Yeah, says it's the amazing.
Right. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So we have a product that a new feature needs to be implemented. It is called the price drop. So I'm going to be taking you through what to do if you have a component library like this, for example, to build this out. So let's jump into the code. So I have this Angular MN application. So I will admit I do have cheat codes to this. I will use them if I need to. That's going to be so annoying. Yeah, every time. But anytime I switch to something, I'll do that. Okay. So yeah, like I was saying, I do have cheat codes below these things. So I worked on this last night and got it all working, just so I don't get too stuck on something. But so let's first start with so where I'm getting all this initial code from. This is something you can access. You go to, let's see if it's in here. This. There's a branch on here called the develop branch. So you'll notice in source app here, there's a meetup event folder. So this is the files that I'm pretty much grabbing to try to do this. So this has already been converted into Angular 2, a big portion of it. And I'm just going to do a Veritas type version of it is my plan. So this is coming right from those files I just showed you. I just have it commented out right now because it would have crashed with this uncommented. So you notice what that application right now in that develop branch is using is material 2. So you'll notice the MD card and things like that. So what I'm going to first do for this is, so this is kind of a little bit cheating too, but since our components are pretty much the same thing, but with the VDL dash prefix instead of MD dash, which if I do a find replace for MD dash and switch it all to VDL, it is going to just still work. So that's kind of the neat thing about this, just to get this up and running a little quicker. Copy paste. That's what I do too. I don't really know anything. I just know the internet tells me. So let's see here. So okay, so the big thing with this, so this is, I'll kind of talk about the structure of this. So this is our Veritas's starter kit, right? So it's that Angular class Webpack starter kit that I mentioned earlier. So this is where we have a source, we have an app folder, and this is where we have Angular beginning features. So those are those routes you saw on the left-hand side of the side navigation there. Those are all just mapped to where these directories are. So in the app.module.ts, so this is where you do, I'll try to use that. So this is where you'll see, so this is where that VDL Angular import of the VDL module comes from. And this is where I'm importing, so you'll notice the introduction components. So all those things on the side navigation were components of themselves, simple files that were there. But the big thing about this is importing. So we're going to be doing, let's see here, let's go this way. Okay. So pretty much the first step was this, to convert this to VDL. So let's see if that worked. I'm going to close out all this. I believe it should just be this. So that did not render. Anyone want to take a guess why? I didn't give you much context, so I don't blame you guys. So the reason that did not render was because we didn't, so I have something commented out in the Prizotron component. So that's this app-meetup event. So this meetup event component here, so you notice the selector of that is app-meetup event, right? So we need to specify this app-meetup event, and that did not appear because I didn't uncomment this. So now we have that app-meetup event tag inside of this HTML, which is the Piezo-tron route that you saw, so it's just loading this component. This might error out. So you notice it spun up and it ran with those VDL tags that we have. We do have errors here, so let's look at what this is. So the VDL input container must contain a VDL input directive. So this is a nice little error message that we have that is warning us something's wrong, right? And if we go into the meetup event component HTML, so you notice we still have this MD input left over that should have been switched over to VDL. So if we do that here, this only occurred because of me not remembering. So we have those two things that we switched over. If we save that now, hopefully it renders properly. We should see a pretty different look after we do that. So let's go to Piezo-tron. So you notice that changed quite a bit, right? So the meetup, so this is what Veritas's inputs look like. So we have a required field on there. So there is something missing still from those. So in our components, we have a label attribute on these. So in here, I can specify meetup API key, for example. And let's just say this field is now just API key. So the placeholder is the API key for that. And let's add a label onto the event ID as well. Alright, so like something like that. Now you'll see that those labels will appear above top where that required asterisk you saw. So we have the meetup API key, we have the meetup event ID. So with that running and working, for example, so the next thing to do is add the API key and the event code as values. So my reason for doing this is because I'm lazy and I don't want to have to re-input the ID and the API key each time. So I am going to cheat here a little bit and grab the code I have down below. So you notice I have this value equals my API key. So I'm just going to hard code it. That's fine. That's fine. I'll reset my key after. It's fine. And then, so the value of the event code is also something we want to input as well. Let's go back here. So I'll just throw that in there. So this is just going to default those values to those input boxes that you saw on the screen. So you'll see those are now there. Another thing with this is just to make this look a little better. So this project is using Flexbox Grid. You'll notice that this just worked because it's just like Bootstrap, and that's what the old stuff I think was using. So it just kind of worked with the call SM12 in there. So I'm just going to switch these both to 3s, and it'll just make those input boxes a little smaller and not span across the whole screen. So you see now both of them are lined up evenly spaced. Let's see what else here. I was starting to build a list of what I wanted to do with this, and I ran out of time, so I'm just going to have to wing it from here probably. So one thing that we have here, so you can get your API code here. We do not store your API key. So one thing I want to do with this box, instead of having this text display here, I want to use a component that Veritas has. So if I go, I'm a normal developer out there, I want something that does something like this, right? So I go to ux.veritas.com, I go to pop-ups and modals. So we see a popover in here. So these are popovers that people can utilize to pop up information next to something, right? And they even have these against info and things like that. What I'm more specifically looking at is for inputs, what can we do? So if we go into form and inputs, we have the input thing here, and you notice these icons on the left here. So there's this icon with the information popover box right here. So if I look at the code and examples of this, so we click this down, and we look at the one that does that, which I find here. So it's the one of that one that I want the information on. So this predefined informational popover is a component you can pass in inside of a VDL input container. So this is just something that's tied to a VDL or a Veritas input box that you can specify. So I'm just going to copy this code right here, and with any luck, it'll just work. So this is the VDL input container that we wanted to change this text right here. So we have to actually use this one. So you can get your API key code from blah, blah, blah. So what we wanted to do was put this inside of the VDL input container. So if I just hit enter here and paste, if I know how to copy paste. The hell you want to do this? All right. So let's paste that code in there. So you notice we have the VDL popover predefined now specified. So if I just simply save this now, it should just render and run that as we see in the example here. So this is what we should see pop up, the very exact same thing. But an error occurs, so let's see what that's about. No provided. I've seen that error before. Yep. I always forget what it is. Right. No, I don't think it's that. I might not need to use this right now. But I never remember what looking at that later. So let's see here. What else can we do? So another thing is the buttons. So you'll notice they're utilizing this VDL raised button right now. So this is something that it was MD raised button, right? So instead of doing that, let's just do a VDL primary button. So now that's going to turn into a primary version button of what Veritas has for their thing. So you know, it's the import names instead of that default thing that we saw before, and now it actually has some color to it and padding around it, things like that. Now let's go into, so the next thing I want to do is implement the pick a winner. So you'll notice on the, I don't know how much time I have, 10 minutes or so. I'll do this quick, I'm like cheating, but so we have the pick a winner prize here. So it's the same concept as the current application that exists out there. This is just an AngularJS one instead. So let's implement that functionality inside of this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and grab whatever for this, so I don't need to spend too much time on it. So the first thing is this line of code here. I'm just going to grab this. So with this, so you'll notice there's this new function that was added. So on this if attendance.length is existing, so this is an entry if inside of here. So this button will only display if attendants are there. And then on click of this button, it'll select an RSVP person. So that's just the winner part. So if we go into the TS file of the meetup event now, so what I'm going to do is really cheat on this and just uncomment this code I had before, since I am running low on time-ish. So what this is doing, so you'll notice this public, yep, Zoom, got it. The public select RSVP here. So so I didn't take much time to see if this code was even good or not. It just worked, so I let it go. but the math.for, math.random, that came from the previous project. So this is how the winners are picked currently. So I just grabbed that, assign it to a number. We take this attendees. So attendees is this TS file here. So all this is an interface, right? So it's just a name and a photo. Now it is name and a photo. And then in, one thing I need to do too. So one thing I had kind of funny is I'm adding, so you know, the poop emoji or whatever you want to call it. So anyone that doesn't have their image in Meetup is going to get that now instead. Just something fun to do. So that's what this is pointing to here. So if you don't have your image in there, you might want to do that now. It might be bad. So that's what that was just blanking to nothing before. Now it's going to point to that CDN and display that image instead. And then let's jump back to here. So this VDL dialog config is, so what you do is you just specify a width, a height, a position, where you top, bottom, left, things like that. And then we have this winner.name, winner.photo that we're passing into the dialog. So this dialog is just a modal that pops up. The namings conflict kind of, but we went with dialog instead of modal. So the, see what else do I need? And then so this dialog.open dialog winner component. So this is just opening this below component here. So this is another component. Our new practice is probably to separate out these components and not have it in one file, but I just did it all in one because I can. And then we notice the template of this is what we have. So if we look at ux.veritas.com again, we have the pop-ups, modals, and dialog/modal here. So in this, we have a basic example and some examples of things. So the main one here that I implemented was the dialog basic here. So you notice the same concept. So I pretty much just copy-pasted this and tailored it towards what we wanted displayed, which is that photo and that name. So it's just utilizing, so there's a video dialog title, there's a video dialog header actions, which is just a close button in the top right corner. And then there's a button on the bottom to close it as well. And then the content within it. So if we go back to here quick, so you notice that format is pretty much the same. So data.name is where we retrieve the name that comes from the Meetup API. And then we have the data.photo URL, which you can see, which is putting an image tag. And that's doing a height and width on it to specify how big it is. And one thing we need to do also in the app.module, so you notice at the beginning of this, I had the dialog winner component commented out because I commented out that code. Just trying to show it in steps. So I'm going to just uncomment that out now. Here. We now are importing the dialog winner component as well, which is what the Chrysotron utilizes. So let's see if I missed anything. So a big thing to point out with this too, so one thing that tripped me up was when I was originally doing this is this /API/RSVPs. It was pointing to, when I first ran this and tried this out, it just pointed to localhost /API, which obviously didn't exist, so I was very confused. But the fix to that is in Webpack, there is a, so this is similar to in the other project where there's a proxy that you can specify. So in Webpack dev.js here, so these are all the configuration files for Webpack. So you notice this proxy here, which is /API, and you specify the target of where the API.meetup.com is. And that allows you to actually just do the / whatever and proxy to that actual API that actually exists. So this is one thing I learned from this. I actually didn't know you could even do this, and so it's kind of cool to figure this out. So if we go back to I think I'm at the point where it should work. I don't know. We'll see. So let's import names here. And I have a backup plan if I can't get it to work. It works, so we're good. So you'll notice I import those names now. So all of those 90, so 97 people that kind of just meet up, for example. So we have a list item. So this VDL list is a component within our library where you can specify names. So that's what they look like. Yeah, so this, Dan, I'm calling you out. You got the emoji there, so you can see that. So then the pick a winner here, so that's what I was just going over with the dialogue. So when you click that, now you'll see it pops up with True Hastings. And I don't know, would you want to do that? You can. But I was just kind of showing, so just keep clicking. Just wait till I win, and then. Correct. Correct. So each time someone wins, they get. So that's where the in the meetup event. So this attendees.splice index is what accomplishes that part of that, and removing the names. And then I can just import the names again, and they all come back 97 of them, and put them back to that attendees. So I think that was, for the most part, it. So yeah, any questions out there on anything? I mean, I can try to answer. Yeah. That's a good question. So the reason we have done that for in the components is because with silent, as far as if I'm remembering this correctly, I might be wrong, so I need to go Google it. But the style encapsulation allows components to reuse styles from other components. So if you want to, so we have a core directory in our component library which has a bunch of styles that multiple components will use. So having that style encapsulation off, having that off allows that to happen. As far as if I'm remembering it correctly, I might be. So I think that was the reason. But having it inside the application itself is not as necessary unless you run into you want to reuse styles from other components.
So you have product partners doing this right now?
Yeah, so we have around, I think we have 3 main products, I believe, that are starting to utilize it and build out their UIs utilizing this component library.
And what kind of challenges are you having? Not only is it Angular 2, but the framework.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we have the benefit a lot of them are coming from the Angular 1 background. So I think, and then so the closest product we've been working with is what's really nice about that is they're completely new. They didn't even start, so they could just start with Angular from the get-go. They don't even have to deal with the Angular JS stuff. The biggest challenges I would say so far have just been getting it to the point where people can start consuming. So what it takes is you need to have like a minimum amount of components for people to start utilizing that low-code VDL for them to even consider starting with something with this. And I think what helps a lot is since we started from Material 2, people trust it a lot more. I think that is what might have helped quite a bit because it's coming from Google pretty much. And we're just kind of taking it and stylizing it to be what Veritas is. That answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ross.
I'm going to let you put the button for elders. John, do you want to kind of with the devices, we have yes, we have 2 front-end masters year subscriptions. If you're not familiar with front-end masters, it's an online video for front-end web technology. It's hosted and owned by a local guy named Mark Bansky. He comes out of China. We also have Jeffrey license, and what else do we have? I have a free 1 month of code school that we give away. Actually, my audit is picked up at the ION group and I think that's about it.
Start with the future.
Yeah. So besides Medium, that's all I have. But that's like
Right.
Nick Wilson.
Hey,
All right, and then should we do code school?
yeah, I have a card for that. Okay, go ahead. You want to
Looks beautiful. That's right. I'm gonna just talk like this from now on.
also have this chapter 1.
Right. Thomas.
How many t-shirts did you get? I came with 5 t-shirts and a sweatshirt. The one I had just bought a water bottle.
Mr. Thomas.
Is he here? Share. I don't know. Let's do it. Yeah, that's what we should do. Switches to that. Yeah. We actually.
You guys wondering what we're trying to change up? So we did a hackathon at the last meetup where we had some people come in and were actually hacking on Private, and then somebody, I don't know who somebody came up with the idea is you RSVP to come to the meetup, and then you win, you're not here. So yeah, something would happen with changing things. A lot of folks at the side. Something fun. Okay, so let's draw again.
Matthew Dordle. Looks like a wizard.
You think maybe he's like, these people are winning and they're like, oh.
Adrian.
Yeah, because all right, so we got
Adrian?
Adrian here.
Maybe I grabbed the wrong way behind. That's it.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, that's it. We think next time. Jim brings license. Here comes.
Dave.
Dave.
I'm so happy that came out. Yep. Where's your motivation?
Yeah, it's not here.
Oh, it's not here.
Okay.
Johnny?
Hey,
there we
Johnny
go.
Briggs.
Oh, where were we going?
Fast, man.
Where were we going next?
She's going anyway.
Okay, doesn't matter. All right, what's next? She's still showing. Are we doing jet rings?
We
Oh, what
did
is
jet
it?
rings.
Oh, so one more.
So 2 front end.
Susie. Oh, Susie?
Small disclaimer on that. You've already used the front end after that. You can't use another one. Mark doesn't like that.
All right.
All right. One more front end master's license. David. Yeah.
No.
Right here. All right.
Tony.
Tony, all right.
Nice.
There you go.
It doesn't look like you.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. Thank you for coming out. Tell your friends. Just a reminder, next time we meet, June 7th. And Michael, can't pronounce his last name. But he's going to be talking about migrating legacy applications, AngularJS to Angular 2+. So don't miss that one. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys.